Hi guys, it's Carlo here. Thank you for listening to our latest episode. It's the support of our community like you that allows us to continue to grow and make this into something truly extraordinary. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to listen to it without the interruption of ads and maybe even experience some bonus content, I'd invite you to join us on our newly launched Patreon. And if maybe that's not something you can do right now, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting on places like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that good stuff. You'll find us under @millennials and community for pretty much all of those. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to InfoM.A.C, brought to you by the Millennials and Community Podcast. On this week's episode, Matt and Carlo mythbust the newly announced Alberta parental rights policies, discuss what you need to know and how it can affect you. If you would like to experience the full episode, please consider joining our Patreon. Thank you for being part of our community. What's up, everybody? My name is Matt. This is Carlo, bringing you today another InfoM.A.C. For those of you who may not be familiar yet, InfoM.A.C is our new series where we bring you short mini episodes, lending some perspective on current events that might be happening in the world around us. Of course, we are in a different format. We're not together in person. We're here virtually so that we can respond quickly to new events as they come up and bringing you our perspective as these events are relevant. In today's InfoM.A.C, we are going to be discussing the recent announcement by the government of Alberta in their new introduction of policy related to parental rights. So we're going to be talking about what is in this policy, what the government has introduced and said, and then we're going to have some discussion around what actually this means for people in Alberta, what this implications of this policy, who would be affected by it, and we're going to look at questioning some of the assumptions that are made that kind of underpin this policy in and of itself. And then just like all of our InfoM.A.Cs, we're going to talk about how this could affect you and what you can do about it in the future. So, on February 1st, the government of Alberta tabled a new policy announcement, which they are calling the Parental Rights Policy under the tagline, Preserving Choice for Children and Youth. Now, right off the bat, this policy largely is about policies that are going to have an impact on people that identify as transgender. So, of course, there are a lot of opinions, a lot of feelings. This is a very complicated topic, and so I want to make sure that as we're bringing this information to you today, that there is as much real information that we can bring you so that you can understand, because this is very emotionally charged and very challenging topic for a lot of people to talk about. So first, I want to outline what is actually a part of this policy that has been proposed by the Alberta government, because already you see on social media, those of you based in Alberta, that there are a lot of misconceptions about what the government is actually proposing. So first things first, the government is proposing an additional heightened amount of medical availability care for transgender adults. Currently, if you're looking at having any sort of genital surgery that goes along with gender reassignment, that is done out of province. So the government is committed to bringing medical professionals who specialize in those types of surgeries to Alberta so that Alberta is not paying for those types of gender reassignment surgeries in other places. It's worth noting that different types of surgery, specifically related to chest or top surgery, does currently take place in Alberta. It's just specifically any sort of genital related surgery that happens out of province. The next thing that the government is proposing in this policy, and in fact, most of the other things, are related to children and youth. So first and foremost, this government policy is suggesting that all gender reassignment surgery for minors, so anyone age 17 or younger, will be prohibited. They were also prohibiting the use of puberty blockers or gender hormone therapies for the purpose of gender reassignment or affirmation for anybody 15 years of age or younger. Anybody 16 or 17 can only choose to commence puberty blockers or hormone-related therapy with parental, physician, and psychologist approval. So that's kind of the next part. The next part is related to our education system. So first of all, currently in Alberta, parents must choose or have the option to choose to opt out of any sort of instruction related to sexual health, gender identity, sexual orientation. Now, the new proposed policy is going to make it that parents must choose to opt in. So no longer do they have the option to opt out, but they have to opt in for their children to receive any sort of instruction on these topics. Next is any sort of material related to gender identity, sexual orientation, sexuality in general, has to be pre-approved by the Ministry of Education. The next ones, which are, in my opinion, more controversial, all parents must consent to have any child 15 years of age or younger to have those children go by a different name or use pronouns that are differing from their biological sex. So if somebody who is a biological male decides to use she, her pronouns or they, them pronouns, that can only be done with parental consent. For 16 and 17-year-olds, if children or youth choose to go by a different name or adopt different pronouns, the parent consent is not required. However, the school is obliged to notify parents that those things are changing. And the last significant part of this policy is that Alberta's government is committing to working with provincial sport organizations to prevent transgender women from participating in women's sports. So they are committed to creating women-only sporting divisions, which means that anybody who identifies as a trans woman would have to be participating in strictly gender-neutral or co-ed, with air quotations, co-ed divisions of athletic competition. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. Feel free to pause it and go back if you want to see, but these are all the things that are currently existing in this policy. And Carlo, I'm interested if you have any questions or things that you want to clarify with any of those pieces. But the one first thing that I want to speak on first and foremost is that this is policy and not law. What that means is whatever party is in power, parties have policy all the time, and the policies that political parties have inform the creation of bills that then potentially become legislation or law. So at this stage, this is not law, this is not legally binding, but this policy signifies the government of Alberta's intent to table these as bills with the intention of making these things legislation or law in Alberta. First, I want to address some of the other myths that are kind of form the core of this policy. All right. So the first myth, again, is that all parents love their children. We know, and I've spoken already, that's not true. You've got 1 in 260 kids that are in foster care. You also, it's important to note that the most recent estimate is that as many as 40% of homeless youth in Canada identify as 2S LGBTQIA+. So again, speaking to your point about this is a huge issue where youth who identify as 2S LGBTQ2IA+, do not feel safe in their own homes. And again, In a perfect world, children should feel safe always. But the two places where children should feel the most safe are at home and in school. And if one of those is not the case, then it should be supported by the other. So schools serve as somewhere where people and children should have access to safety, safe adults, safe environment where they can learn, they can grow, they can develop. And that's especially important if that environment isn't true at home. The second myth that I want to dispel right now is that kids that identify with transgender or that experience any sort of gender dysphoria are just walking into a doctor's office and getting surgery. This is absolutely not true. And in fact, it is already the case that legally in Alberta, you need to be of legal age, 18 or older, to actually get gender reassignment surgery. So this being put into the policy document is actually a straw man because it's creating this fear mongering that kids are just walking into doctors' offices and getting any sort of surgical intervention. That is just strictly not true. And in fact, in order to even get any sort of gender reaffirming care, there has to be extensive consultation with physicians, with psychologists, and psychiatric team members to have any sort of intervention, whether it's hormone related or surgical. So that's really important. The next thing that underpins this is the idea that puberty blocking and hormone therapy is permanent. And in fact, the opposite is true according to a lot of medical professionals. The idea that you're doing puberty blocking simply means that you're delaying the effects of puberty until later in life, whereas the effects of puberty are permanent, right? So for a youth that is experiencing gender dysphoria, these allow for an extension of the timeline, essentially, for children and youth to be able to make some decisions about their gender until later. So in fact, if the government did actually care about their tagline of preserving choice for children and youth, then some of these tools like puberty blockers, like hormone therapies, actually do that preservation of choice until they're adults and they can actually make some of these decisions. So that's the second one. The third one, and this is one that I hear a lot, and this is the one that I get really, really upset about, is this idea that teachers are teaching kids to be transgender, that kids are teaching kids to be LGBTQ, that these are things that are being taught, that they're being taught that other genders exist and that they're okay, and that these are things that are being taught. And I want to be really, really clear as somebody who has worked in schools across Alberta, that these are things that not only are not being taught, but that teachers don't actually have the capacity to teach. The curriculum that exists, not only in Alberta, but curriculums across Canada, across North America, curriculums are designed so that teachers have guidance as to what needs to be taught in school. And while this is happening, the amount of expectation on the amount of work that teachers need to do, whether it's facilitating extracurricular activities or marking or other engagement, continues to go up. And so what we're seeing is teachers are constantly placed in positions with less capacity to be able to teach. So the idea that teachers are arbitrarily teaching these things in school is completely not true. And in fact, there is no mention at all to gender or differing or multiple genders anywhere in the Alberta curriculum. And so the idea that these teachers are en masse going rogue and teaching things about these genders is just completely not true. And for anybody who doesn't agree with me on that, you're welcome to check out any of the health and life skills curriculum. They can be publicly found on the Alberta website. So that's kind of the next thing. And then again, I just want to reinforce one more time that this myth that all parents love their children. And if in fact it was true that all parents love their children, then these policies would not be needed. And that's just the bottom line. So to your question then, coming back, is what do we do if we don't actually have people who are transgender in our life? And so the first thing that I would say is that you probably have met someone, if they're an acquaintance or somebody maybe second or third degree connection who is transgender and you just don't know about it. And I think the most important thing that we need to remember is all people are people, and the fact that we don't explicitly know whether somebody in our life is transgender doesn't matter. What I also know is that all of us have children in our life. And what we need to understand is whether or not we have people in our life that we know about who are transgender, this matters to us because it means that our children are going to be going into a school where it is unsafe for certain children. In a world where this policy becomes law and children are no longer able to speak to their teachers or these trusted adults about some of the feelings and the struggles that they're having with their gender or their sexuality, things that they don't feel like they can talk about at home, it means that the teachers now are no longer able to have those conversations and be a safe space for somebody. It's also really important to mention that if parents now have to opt in to some of these discussions around gender and sexual education, that the default will be teachers are no longer able to talk about consent. And so we need to talk about the ramifications of a system where the default is that teachers in Alberta will no longer be able to teach consent because it'll be that is a part of the health and sexual health curriculum in Alberta. And more importantly, I think than that, even if you don't have a single child in your life, and so this part isn't resonating with you, all of us should be challenging a government who is publishing policy without consultation or based on flat out falsehoods and lies about what is the case. We should be able to live in a world where we can trust that our government is making decisions based on a fact, not based on opinion from people who are not trained to have an opinion on certain matters. And if the government is not going to consult with agencies like the Alberta Medical Association or the Alberta Teachers Association prior to publishing policy like this, then you as a citizen should be in a position to challenge your government on these things.
For those people that are looking at this and they're going, well, what can I do? What can I learn more? How can I become involved in this if this is something that I want to become involved in? What is it that you would suggest for them that they can do kind of in the immediate and the long-term future?
Yeah, so there's three things that you can do. The first thing that you can do is write to your MLA. I think that there are too few people who are involved in the in your civic responsibility or civic privileges, I suppose. And voting is not the only way that we as citizens, as constituents, can be a part of this work. So first of all, write to your MLA. Make sure that they understand how you feel about a topic, regardless of how you feel. Write to your MLA. The second thing is if you feel strongly that this is policy that will endanger kids, which is something that I strongly feel it will, then make your voice heard. Attend all the numerous events and rallies that are going to be happening and continue to happen, I'm sure, for the months to come. And third, and I think most importantly, especially if you're uncomfortable or unwilling to do one of the first two things I mentioned, have conversations with people. There are so many people in my life that are well-intentioned, but they don't have access to or have not pursued the information that I've shared today. And so these myths are things that they might hold true. They might believe that teachers are out here teaching kids that they should all go and become drag queens. They might hold to these myths that kids can walk into a doctor's office and get surgery after one conversation or without their parents' knowledge, right? These are things that they may sound ridiculous, but these are things that people actually believe. And so by having conversations, kind conversations with the people in your life, you can help debunk some of these myths and help to eliminate some of the fear mongering. Because when you understand the reality of what's actually happening in these situations, you understand pretty quickly how ludicrous a policy like this is. But if you don't recognize that those things are not in fact facts, then it's easier to understand that a government might want to put these things into place. But I wanted to leave everyone with this idea that what sort of background, education, pre-screening do most parents have to become parents? And the answer is nothing. The answer is that you, at least in terms of traditional childbirth, you were smart enough to have sex. And that is your single qualification for being a parent. Whereas in Alberta, you have to have gone to school for sometimes 4 years, most often 6+ years to become a school teacher. And you need a hell of a lot more education than that to be a doctor, especially if you're specializing in something like psychiatric medicine or any sort of surgeon. And so I want us to be really, really clear that while parents have and should have a vested interest in the well-being of their children, that the opinion of a parent is not equivalent to the professional and educated opinion of professionals who have studied in terms of being able to discern what is medically best for the development of children, youth, and medical advice for adults.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We are over time here, and I'm okay with that, just purely for the passion that I see you expressing right now. So as we kind of close off here, is there any final thought that you want to give, or do you think you've said it already?
The final thought that I want to give is that all humans are humans, and that there is no such thing as black and white answers and solutions. And I want you to imagine what it would feel like to wake up and feel different. And then I want you to imagine how much harder it'd be to wake up, feel different, and then have a government tell you that you are not entitled to any sort of support to validate or care for you in the ways in which you feel different. And I want you to imagine what that would feel like. And that's the only thing that I would like to leave everyone with today.
Thank you for that. So at this point, guys, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of InfoM.A.C. You can hear the passion and the urgency in Matt's voice. So we encourage you to engage with us, ask the questions that you have. We're going to do the best to answer them. We're going to get you the necessary links and information that you can get to form your own opinions. And we just want to encourage everybody that's listening today that if you felt passionately about anything that we talked about, share it with someone that you know, and let's raise awareness so that people that need our support can have our support, because this podcast in general is entirely about being there and helping our communities grow, and our kids, no matter how they identify, are part of our communities, and they deserve every level of support that we can give them. So thank you guys so much. Signing off. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, everyone.